I'd like to call the Select Board meeting Wednesday, August 16th, 2023 at 7 p.m. to order. I'd like you to join me in the pledge, but I would also like to have a moment of silence after the pledge for Thomas Cirillo. He was an assessor in Hull, very active community member, and he was the business manager for the labor union, and he will be missed.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Stay upright, stay upright. Thank you. Yes, the first order of business, I'd like to welcome Jen Constable as our new official town manager. And at the same time, I'd like to thank Chief Dunn for filling in. Job well done. I think he's on vacation this week, and he deserves it. Jen, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say, not to put you on the spot, but.
Nope, I'll just be very brief and say I'm thrilled to be here. I look forward to working with this board. I think it's a dynamic board. And if anybody needs anything, I have an open door policy. Stop in, say hi, send questions, and let's get to work.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jen. All right, well, with that said, we're going to go a little out of order on the agenda. I'm just going to go for request of approval first. Item number 3, Mike McGurgle, Executive Director, 1117 Nantasket Ave, Hull Life Saving Museum. One-day wine and malt license on Tuesday, September 19th, 2023, from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. for team building. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. All right, then I'm going to jump to reappointment of members of the following board committees. We have the CPC, Community Preservation Committee, Conservation Commission, Council of Aging, Historic District Commission, and the Park and Rec Commission. Now, these members are ones where their terms have expired, but they wish to serve. In the future, we will have other people come in where they want to be on a board. They haven't been on a board, and there'll be other people that want that same position. We will go through that process in a future meeting. But this is just ones that their terms have expired and they wish to stay on that board. So first up, Rachel Kelly, and she is a select board appointed person on the Community Preservation Committee. Her term expired, and this term would be from, I guess, from the time we appoint her till, it really doesn't say on this. Do we have any guidance on that, Jim? Yeah. Well, they look
Usually
like
there's a list.
the 3 there's no list.
Usually
there.
there's a chart. I don't know if it's in the packet or not.
Yeah. Well, it looks like they're 3-year terms. So is there a motion to reappoint Rachel Kelly?
Can I ask you a question, Greg? So, just to be clear, for these ones where we're reappointing, there were no new letters of, because Lori put up a solicitation for new letters of interest for all the different boards many months ago, so there's no new candidates interested. There's
Correct.
Okay.
So the ones we're doing are the ones that are not competitive, we'll call them.
Got it.
Yeah.
And they've sent in their letter. Got it.
What was do we know what the deadline was for those letters of interest?
The words I got was the deadline has passed. The other posting for the advisory board may be the one that's still out there.
Oh, okay.
But Laurie informed me yesterday that
That the deadline had passed, so we have no, okay.
I believe she told me, because I was asking for the Economic Development Committee, that it was July 15th.
Yeah, it's a
Maybe-
quick posting.
Yeah, so it's been several weeks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Greg,
there is.
there's a list in the, further in your packet that
Okay.
has the terms and seats open.
How deep in that packet?
Yeah, I'll give you mine.
Because ours just kind of repeats itself with,
It's for each
I think you have
committee.
it right there, Greg. So,
It's each committee.
Yeah, that looks
Kelly's
like it.
term would be 6/1/2023
23.
through 5/31/2026.
okay, so it is a 3-year term.
Right.
Usually we try to do it to the end of the fiscal year, so it'll be 6
So
It
6:30?
expires 5/31. That's how we have them.
I don't know.
They're all 5/31.
Yeah, but as we reapprove.
We can
or
change it, yeah.
Appoint, it's June 30th, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, that's what we're
So
trying to do.
June 30th.
Okay.
This is generated, I think, by a computer program, so it may not have been accurate in that regard.
So it would be 7/1/2023 to 6/30/2026.
7/1/23 to 6/30/26. All right, with that minor adjustment, were you the one that motioned to approve?
I haven't, but I will.
Well, no, we had a motion, I just can't
Yeah.
remember
did
who
we?
did it.
Erwin, you made the motion, and, oh, no.
No,
I'm sorry.
that was for the previous-
That was for the
That was for Mike McGurl.
Sorry about
Lifesaving
that.
Museum.
Lifesaving,
Sorry, Erwin.
Well, we'll just redo.
Okay.
All right, so to reappoint Rachel Kelly for another 3-year term on the CPC from 7/1/23 to 6/30/26. Motion made by Brian, second by
I'll second.
Jason. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Thank you. Next up is the Conservation Committee. We have 4 terms that have expired, and they have sent letters of interest. I guess we could do all 4 at once if we'd like.
4 out of 5 expired at the same time? Is it 5 people or more on that board?
Yeah.
7.
Total?
7
total.
total, and 4 have expired, 1's vacant, and that's the one we'll fill at a future date.
And so we're having just a general lack of interest in a lot of boards? Is that what we just heard a little while ago?
Well, I wouldn't say lack of interest, because we haven't seen that next round. The people that have never been on a board and are wishing to serve, we'll see them in the future.
But a notice was sent out, and we haven't
Yeah.
got tremendous feedback, let's say.
We haven't seen those letters yet, right?
No, we haven't seen the amount of feedback, but it's a struggle sometimes. I mean, there's a lot of boards that will constantly be
Oh,
filled.
no,
but
I
there's
know it
some-
is.
There's some
I'm just
that,
curious if it improved at all, recently, but.
all right, so are these,
Sorry.
your
So
terms?
this is the Concom, huh?
Continue.
It is.
Can I
Jason?
just,
Yep.
so, just to be clear, so there are 4 seats up for reappointment. There's 1 open seat. Have we received more than 1 letter of interest for the Conservation Commission?
I haven't been told by Laurie.
We haven't seen those
Letters would
letters yet.
usually go into the
Yeah.
select board's office. I thought this list here was of people who are already on, currently
Yes,
on the board.
it is.
Who wanted to be reappointed.
Mhm.
So other people may very well have written in to express an interest to be on the board. But right now, this list was for those already on the board who wanted to be reappointed.
And it's been a common practice for years.
But it is just an open question for discussion, right? Of,
Mhm. Yeah.
we have 5 spots to appoint, say we got 7 or 8 letters,
It's a good question.
right?
Mhm.
I don't know how others feel about that.
Maybe somebody from the Conservation Commission can answer that question for us.
We don't have.
If you want
it
to
would be a
postpone
general
this to the next
question.
meeting to get more information, you can certainly do that, because this is handled by the, put together by the office, so,
Mhm.
Yeah.
if you have questions on it.
So, but common practice has always been what we've done, reappoint, and it goes back to what Jerry had said about the lack of numbers and trying to establish our boards so they can continue their work.
No, I get that, but if there is more interest this time around, if there are 8 people interested in 5 spots for appointment, that's some,
It's a valid argument
Well, it's up to you guys if you want to,
by my colleague in the blue coat.
how would you like to move forward?
Right,
I-
right. Yeah, I just wanted to point out and make sure the board is aware. So the charts that you have in front of you for each committee are essentially color-coded. The greens are the reappointments, and those are individuals that have indicated an interest to continue serving. And then the gray is, no action needed. Those are terms that have not yet expired. For a Conservation Commission, it looks like that there is still 1 remaining seat that could be filled by somebody who may have submitted a letter of interest.
But I think if I might, I think what you're saying, Jason, is that if there are people that are interested, is it automatic that we reappoint, or do we look at them the same way as people that are interested in it, and as a way of sometimes getting new people in. And if we always reappoint, we're kind of closing the door to new people coming in that are interested. And we don't know if there are applications for these seats. And there are 2 seats here, right? One is, she has expressed an interest, and one has not expressed an interest. So there are 2 seats, but we don't know how many applications there are for those.
He's on the CPC.
Some of this-
Yeah, I went back to the first one.
Thank you.
I mean, if you're not comfortable moving forward, we could table it till our next meeting. Jen?
Yeah, just to throw out another perspective to the board and not, obviously make a decision how you feel, but the other side of the coin is that you have some people, the boards in the past have indicated to chairs if there are any issues with board members, to bring it to the appointed authority's attention, which would be this board, that there is value in having consistency and continuity on a board, especially one like the CPC or Concom, where they're dealing with regulatory matters that come before them. So, just another consideration.
Another good point.
So how would you guys like to move forward?
I mean, I don't know if it's a motion, but I would say I would prefer to table this discussion to the next meeting and just get the current state of all letters of interest, new and existing, for all these committees and commissions. Have that as an updated packet, and be able to make the decision there with all the information. I think Lori gave a very clear deadline. She advertised it very prominently, very frequently, and it's been that kind of deadline of mid-July, soliciting interest in these committees and commissions. So we should take it as where it is now, but if there are other people who have been interested and it exceeds the number of spots for new appointments, I think we should just look at it all holistically.
Yeah, I agree. It could be a moot point. We don't know if we have applications, but I think in fairness to people who are applying, they should be reviewed along with everybody who's in the pool.
All right, so with that said, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, and just the last thing, I mean, this is not a reflection on any individual person and the amount of time that they've served. I mean, a lot of people, respect people who serve in the public on all these committees and commissions. It's a lot of time, but I think in interest of fairness, it makes sense. So I'll make a motion to table the discussion on committee and commission reappointments to the next select board meeting.
Just could you say a future one, because the next one is special town meeting.
Oh, our next meeting.
We're not gonna be doing it
I'll make a
then.
motion to table the discussion on reappointment and appointment of committee and commission members for these committees and commissions to a future select board meeting.
Jen?
Yeah, just for discussion, I have learned that the committees in front of you have no other letters of interest, and so if you put it off, it will need to be posted again that there are vacancies to solicit some letters of interest for these vacancies.
So we know for all these committees, there are no letters of interest.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay,
That
that was the
changes it.
question.
I believe it was new news that we just
Oh,
got.
okay.
That changes it.
All right, so
You
we go
withdraw your
back.
motion?
I will withdraw my motion, given that we do not have additional or
It was a
new.
good discussion, though.
It was nice. All right,
Okay.
so we're back to where we were.
So did we approve the
No, we haven't done the
CPA?
We did do that one.
Okay.
That one's approved. So
Concom,
Concom, 3-year terms, and those terms would be from 7/1/23 to 6/30/26. Those names are looking to be reappointed: Sam Campbell, Catherine Jaquitho, Paul Paquin, and Louis Sorgi. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded? By Brian. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody? You there?
Aye.
Jerry?
I think I might abstain.
That's what you'd like to do, so 4, nothing with 1 abstain. All right, so they are, and to remind everybody, if you're in the audience, you have to get sworn back in, you have to pass the test again before you can serve. All right. Next up, Council of Aging. These are 3-year terms as well. We have letters of interest from Mimi Leary, David Irwin, and Marlene Earl. Their term is just for 1 year. So it'd be from 7/1/23 to 6/30/24. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Irwin, second by Brian. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Historical District Commission. We have 2 that would like to continue serving for a 3-year term. We have Phil Maloney and Robert Pazzini. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Motion by Brian, second by Irwin. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, 5-0. And the last one, well, I believe it's Park and Rec, and I'm going to abstain from this and let Irwin do it.
Okay, Park and Rec, we have 1 position. It's a 3-year term from 7/1/23 to 6/30/26. We have Michelle Leary, who has applied. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4-0 with 1 recusal.
Thank you, Irwin. All right. Wait till Jim gets back. Yeah, we do have to wait till Jim gets back with a few pieces of paper for us to discuss the changes to the home rule petition.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
While we're waiting for Jim, I could just let everybody know that the boards with remaining vacancies are those, some that you just appointed, as well as Hull Cultural Council, Veterans Council, and there's a vacant designee needed for the Affordable Housing Committee from the Economic Development Committee. So if anybody's watching and interested, they're encouraged to submit their letters of interest.
Thank you, Jen. Jason?
Isn't there also, are there not also vacancies in the Economic Development Committee? Or
That
just-
is all the information I have right
Mm,
now.
oh, okay.
But I can follow up on that for you.
Oh, yeah.
Did the Affordable Housing ask for a designee of the Select Board to serve?
I can follow up with them as
Yeah, I
well.
think they did that at their last meeting. I don't know if they forwarded it or not.
Does any board members have any updates at this point while we're waiting for town council? Anything they'd like to share? Anyone like to share the,
Yeah, I want to thank the harbor Kurt Bornheim. There was an issue with the dock down at A Street, the pier where you drop off. And it's supposed to be, I think the town bylaw was, should be a 30-minute maximum.
Mhm.
And people have been using the dock all day, going to the restaurant, what have you.
Mhm.
So I called Kurt on Monday, and he had to sign up on Thursday.
Job
So
well
there's
done.
now a sign that says 30-minute, because some of the neighbors down there, actually, I got a couple one irate call, so, which prompted me to call Kurt. And, yeah, thank you to Kurt for his experience in that.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Jerry?
Speaking of Kurt, he was at an event I thought was really cool last Friday night. A few of us were out there, but the Hull High Wood Shops, at the request, I believe, of the principal, who gave a really nice speech, or a lot of people that gave nice speeches, but combined and blended with the boat building community at the Hull Life Saving Museum, if I'm correct, right? And they dedicated a boat. They completed their first year of that program, and they built a boat from scratch, a skiff, I think 18-foot with a 30-foot, 30-horsepower engine on it. Took it for a ride all around. There were quite a few people there. Dedicated it to Emily M. Carroll, I believe. It's really cool. And there is a veterans tie-in to the whole piece as well. The boat is going to be used, I believe, to somehow be tied into the veterans. So I thought that was really cool. And Kurt was there overseeing
Yep.
the boys, 6 boys on that boat as they flew around the gut area, which is pretty choppy,
Oh,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, Jerry. Erwin?
Yeah, I just wanted to recognize Friends of Nantasket Beach on the music that they've had and the entertainment this past week. They had a group called Puzzle Chairs. I won't try to explain it, but it was intergenerational, and there were about 30 to 35 people that participated, anywhere from about 6 years old to early 80s, I think. So it was a great event.
Nice. Jason?
I just wanted to share, I know, I think a few of us have heard from people and been seeing chatter about the weekend ferries out of Hull and how they have been, the weekend ferry service, which I think only runs till Columbus Day and is only in the summer. All the runs start in Hingham, go to Hull, go to Pemberton, and then go into Long Wharf. And many of them, I mean, I've experienced it, friends have experienced it, are full by the time they get to Hull. Sometimes they're full before they even leave Hingham. And I don't know if there's an immediate remedy in terms of increased capacity. I doubt that there is because of the contract that Boston Harbor Cruises has with the MBTA. I think it's something to take notice of as they plan and do their contract, the Boston Harbor Cruises with MBTA for next year. Because I think what happened is, my understanding is that the weekday service from Hull has still been very under capacity from what it was before the pandemic. You know, it's increasing and going up, and I think, you know, it was just nobody's fault. I mean, I think nobody knew it was going to be so popular, but I wonder if in the short term, because the general manager of Boston Harbor Cruises is really friendly, approachable, if there's something we can do as a board or as a town manager to communicate with him, is there something that they can post in terms of notices, something on social media, this, you know, just kind of real-time information, this boat is full, or these, you know, maybe sharing some information now, these particular rides are at or always near capacity through the summer. I mean, we only have a few weekends left, but I think it's worthwhile because it is really difficult. I mean, a lot of people use it, especially with the Sumner tunnel closure, to get to the airport, and if you can't, you know, get to the airport. So anyway, I was just thinking of something we could do in terms of outreach to them, to Boston Harbor Cruises, to Bob Lawler, just to see how we can communicate better with passengers. Just a thought. Maybe it's something to look at for next year. If capacity isn't something that can be increased, maybe a ticketing process like they do for the island ferries, because they're so,
Yeah.
Just plain using a bigger boat.
a bigger boat.
Yeah.
They don't have, the bigger boat can't stop.
I forget, there was a perfect storm the other day when that happened.
Yeah.
I forget what the reason was.
It's happened a couple times.
Yeah.
now,
Yeah,
you
but the
know.
larger boats can't stop in Hull.
Oh, no kidding.
The way they pull up, they have to load from the front. Yeah.
And Jen, we do have a contact at the T that you're in touch with, right?
Yes, so we can definitely reach out to Bob Lawler about communication. I did notice that this year the summer ferry schedule appears to be much reduced from previous years, and I think that's compounding the issue. We can reach out to the MBTA Advisory Board and the Ferry Committee and put this on their radar as something to lean on. That's another avenue that we can take. It likely is not, I can probably almost unfortunately guarantee it won't change for this season.
Right.
The communication possibly.
Yeah.
But we can definitely, I think it's good to get it on the radar now prior to next season.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. All right, we're going to go to item 2, discussion and approval of changes to proposed law to extend existing leases for Jake's Steamboat Wharf and Mezzomari, or grant new town leases per the home rule petition. And Jim has some paperwork for us.
Apparently, the copy of the legislation didn't make it through, and my cover memo was emailed to the board, and I just found that out, so I'm giving you now copies of the proposed legislation that has red line changes on, and I can go through it with you. A couple more that you want to see. So you may recall that the town meeting authorized the select board to file for special legislation to extend the leases to 3 establishments in town who have been long-term, for decades, tenants at their location. They are Jake's, Steamboat Wharf, and Mezzomare. Under the existing law, without the special legislation, those leases would have to go out for solicitation of bids or proposals when they become due. Over the years, we found that it's a disincentive to some of the businesses to make continued investments on their property, with the result that they don't increase the property because they're concerned that, well, my lease is going to expire in the next, 7 years, 7 or 8 years, and they may not even be able to get financing for the improvements that they're contemplating. So this is not, the first time that this has come up in Massachusetts. Plymouth, for example, if you're familiar with downtown Plymouth, on the pier, the public pier that's there's some restaurants, there's some boat terminal activity there. And they, several years ago, got special legislation through to allow the select board to continue or renew the leases or extend the leases for the existing tenants. Excuse me. It's up to the board as to whether they want to do that, and the idea behind the legislation, which was discussed at the town meeting, was that the board would have to be satisfied that those establishments have a plan to make improvements to their property and to their business operation. And if the board was satisfied with that, then the board could enter into a new or an extended lease or an amendment to the existing lease. The leases expire as follows: Steamboat 2030, Beach Market, which is Mezzomare, 2027, and Jake's 2031. So pursuant to the town meeting vote, it was drafted according to what seemed to be the best way to get this through the legislature, consistent with other similar special acts over the years. The legislative committee that was reviewing it proposed certain changes, and they were working with Representative Moschino and Senator O'Connor on that. Representative Moschino spoke to me about the proposed changes, and we went over them, and I frankly didn't see that they were any significant or deviation from the intent of the legislation, but the legislative committee wanted the select board to review them and vote to either approve them or not approve them. So I can go through them all. As I say, they just added some additional language, which is standard language for legislation, notwithstanding any general or special law to the contrary. They added that. That's typical language. Though it was something that the selectmen could do, they agreed to other terms and conditions that the select board deem in the best interest of the town, that they added that, or they moved that language around. And that's all basically that I can see that they did. That they moved the language around or added some general language which didn't change the intent. They did move the listing of the properties from one part of what the town submitted as part of the request to a separate section of the special legislation, which doesn't change anything. They're just moving it around. So that's what they have here. I realize and didn't realize until this evening that the proposed legislation somehow wasn't in the packet, and so that's why I just handed it out to you and explained it. If for some reason you don't want to act on it this evening, you could certainly postpone it to your next meeting. I will say that the longer that it doesn't get back to the legislative committee, the longer that it takes to get them to act on it and hopefully to recommend it or move it along in the legislative process. I'm not sure when your next meeting is.
September.
2 weeks after town meeting.
2 weeks after town meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you could also review this, and typically the board is posted to be in session at town meeting.
Mhm.
So you could discuss it on August 31st at the special town meeting. You have a regular meeting there.
Well, I mean, personally, myself, I'm fine with
I'm fine with it.
voting on it tonight. It's just a tweak of the language. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I have
Owen?
a couple of questions. The dates that you gave us, 2030, 2020, are those their current leases when they expire?
Yes,
And this would allow us to renew those leases at those dates without putting it out to bid? Is that essentially what we're asking?
that's what town meeting voted to authorize the selectmen to seek special legislation from the legislature to be able to do that, based on the premise that these establishments are not likely to make improvements that they've been talking about or that they may want to do because the lease expires in some of them less than 10 years.
Right.
And in order to get financing, they typically require long-term leases. Doesn't mean that the board has to extend the leases or has to renew the leases, but it gives the board the opportunity to do that, with the board being satisfied as to what they're proposing to do to the property. And if the board isn't satisfied with that, then the board could say, no, we're gonna wait until the lease expires and go through the normal RFP process.
And typically what's the term of the lease renewals?
Typically 30 years under the, whatever the board wants, up to the maximum allowed by state law. And right now, that's 30 years.
30 is the maximum.
Jim, can I make a clarification? Erwin, I think your initial question, did you ask, it would allow the board to renew the leases from approval, legislature approval forward? Not, I believe, Erwin, did you ask if the board can renew the lease at the time of expiration without going out to bid?
Yeah.
Well, the idea is to, if these places want to get the extension of their lease so that they will presumably make whatever the improvements are sooner rather than in 8 to 10 years, that they could do that if they get the renewed
So
lease.
this would allow us to renew their leases before they expire?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Any other
And
questions?
the state's involved because of the no bid situation, right? Because we're granting
Yes.
leases to these 3 properties. And I guess my first question is, we have 3 properties in town, right? And we've highlighted which 3 they are, but do we have a plan to maybe add more? Do we think it's too many? Because, again, I think it's a valid question. Are there other properties around that we could add more? Is there a restriction on 3?
No, there's no restriction on 3. The prior board and prior town meeting in discussing this felt that these establishments who are long-term tenants with the town, literally decades, or in the case of Jake's, this is their 75th year in operation there, and they've expressed an interest in wanting to make improvements to the property, but they all need a longer-term lease in order to be able to get the financing. Bear in mind that Steamboat owns the building, but the town owns the land.
Right.
Jake's owns the building, the town owns the land. Mezzomare, the town owns both the land and the building.
In certain situations, I see it as kind of a win-win, right? The town has property that maybe we can't afford to develop, we don't get into that kind of business, right? And for a restaurant or a business, it's a good opportunity to, secure a long-term spot for yourself, I guess, so. But again, I'm just curious about are there any other identified areas where there might be more opportunities for situations like that?
Shipwrecked.
Jen?
Yep, I can address this a little bit. So first, I just want to remind, especially the newer members of the board, that town meeting did approve the board to seek this exception for these 3 properties. These 3 property owners indicated, had come forward and indicated an interest in capital improvements in their property, but as Jim explained, to get financing on a lease that's going to, for financing for maybe 20 years, but your lease is going to expire in 10, might not make that financing available to them. But I think more to your question.
No, I see it,
Jerry,
I'm not
they
arguing,
were the
I guess
three.
I see it as a good thing, and it's a good situation, and I think we kind of know, like, Jake's it looks like a beautiful building, and I assume if they want to do more work, it's, again, fantastic situation. That's exactly what we want to see.
Yep.
And the other properties that maybe, like you mentioned, need to look long-term, again, it makes perfect sense business-wise, so I think I would support it 100%, but, like I said.
Are
there
you
might be-
asking about other properties?
Yeah, there might be other spots where, the town, again, doesn't specialize in build-outs, right, and running other business. We would, this is a good situation for a business, and we're trying to bring business into town, so.
Yeah, it didn't, sorry, Jim.
Other properties, it's up to the board to petition the town meeting, to authorize the board to petition the legislature. And, I think part of the reasoning was these are long-term existing businesses. There are some other properties, I think Brian mentioned Shipwrecked. That's fairly new operation. There was, prior to the current Shipwrecked operation, Bill Dwyer had a much less robust type of establishment there. And certainly Shipwrecked has done wonderful improvements and has excellent food and so forth. But they've only been in operation there for a couple of years. I don't know how many, but it's under 5 years. And I think they just got their lease within the last year and a half or so. So
Is that a similar situation? Is that town-owned land? I don't know.
the pier is owned by the town. The building is apparently owned by the operators there, but the lease from the town is that they can maintain the building there, and also the change from the prior operation was to lease to them the area that they use for a very popular outside patio.
So it's similar in that it's town-owned land, but there's a funky situation with the real estate. They own the building.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily driving the
No,
intent behind
no.
this. The only difference that I'm aware of is that Shipwrecked is a fairly new operation there, and the board and I believe the town wanted to, concentrate on establishments that have been there a long time. I'm trying to think of other commercial property. There's the Boy Scout building, but that's different.
The yacht club, the saltwater
The
club.
Yacht Club and the Saltwater Club.
The
board-
parking lot where Daily Ones
Yeah.
has their trucks.
Yeah,
There's not many spots. There's one sore one that we don't touch, which is Bay Ave East, the gas station.
Yeah, and I
but
believe,
town does not own that.
Correct.
and the Saltwater Club and the Yacht Club were recently renewed.
Yeah,
About 2 years ago, I think.
But again, to your point, Jerry, in your question, these property, or these lessees had approached the town.
Yeah.
For that
Like I
specific
said, I would,
reason. You're right, it's a win-win.
yeah, I would support it 100%, sure.
Any more conversation? Motion to approve?
Yep.
A motion by Brian. Anyone would like to second it?
Second.
Second by everyone. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thanks for all your work on that, Jim.
thank you. I want to thank especially Representative Mosquito and Senator O'Connor, who really carried this through to the legislature for the town. It's not always easy to get bills to move. Now we have to wait, hopefully the committee will vote it out, and hopefully the legislature will approve it. It is a home rule petition, but that doesn't mean that they have to approve it, but we certainly hope that they will. They've done it in other instances, and we do have protections. It does incorporate parts of the uniform procurement law in Massachusetts by requiring the town to be satisfied and to also state a reason why they're not putting it out to regular requests for proposals.
And Jerry, I think you had another question in there, maybe it was just a statement. Everything we do at town meeting, no matter what it is, has to go to the state level for their approval, then it comes back, and then we can act whatever they give us approval on, so. We all good, we ready to move on to, we're gonna go to discussion before we hit the approval part.
Yes.
So, special town meeting, Thursday, August 31st, 2023, review of the warrant articles. Jim, I don't know if you wanna take the lead, or Jen,
Oh, we can
whoever's comfortable over there.
do both?
Yeah, we can do both. I
Tag
think
team.
Jim's gonna take the lead, having worked on it a little bit longer.
Sure. Let me just get my copy from the packet here.
I'll just note while Jim's looking through his paperwork, you have a copy of the draft warrant. You also should have a copy of the warrant with the advisory board recommendations in your packet for your reference.
So going in the order of the draft of the warrant, the first article is submitted at the request of the Zoning Board of Appeals to have basically an accessory dwelling unit provision in the bylaws. This was discussed at the last town meeting. There were certain questions and concerns that were raised. Pat Finn has shepherded this through the process, and now there's this updated, revised accessory dwelling unit bylaw that I believe the board supported putting on the warrant. Well, the board approves it, or supports it or not is another matter, but it was requested by the zoning bylaw committee. I should also mention the reason that we're having this town, I think everyone probably knows, but for those who don't know, reason that we're having this special town meeting is because someone submitted a citizen's petition for an article and for a call of a special town meeting, which people have the right to do that. Under state law, when there's a citizen's petition to call a special town meeting, it has to be acted on within 45 days of when the petition is filed. And that made somewhat of a crunch time for a lot of the departments and the staff, because there are certain hearings that have to be held, there's certain notices that have to be published. So some of the town departments took advantage, so to speak, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, of submitting articles that they felt should be presented earlier rather than waiting to the annual town meeting in May. So the first article is one of them. This is substantially the work of, as I said, Pat Finn, and at the request of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Pat is, I believe, the chairperson of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Article 2 was proposed by George Boylan, the moderator. It's a proposal to have what's called a consent agenda, whereby under this, what's being proposed, if it gets passed as an amendment to the bylaws, the moderator, the chair of the board of the select board, and the chair of the advisory board would review the warrant before the town meeting and decide if there are any articles that could be grouped together because they're of a common subject matter, or that they're routine housekeeping type articles. This, if this gets passed, the first town meeting that it would be effective would be the annual town meeting, in which people recall there are frequently articles that relate to each other, that are more housekeeping articles, authorizing contracts with the state, approving balance fund use by the treasurer's office, some other standard items. And this is sort of an experiment that George came up with that could lead to more effective consideration at town meeting. George, as I say, will confer with the chairs of the select board and advisory board, and George will then decide if he thinks there are any that are not controversial that could be done in this consent agenda. However, the public has the right, with 7 people objecting to an article being on the consent agenda, in which case it will go back as a regular article and be treated like all the other articles. So George reports that, and I would agree that this is done in several other towns. They all have slight variations. How this will work and how remains to be seen. It can always be changed by a future amendment if the town meeting or any of the boards are not satisfied with the way that it's operating.
Jim, if I could interrupt, like at the end of each article, if you could say what the advisory board had recommended. Like the first one, they're not gonna make the decision until town meeting.
Right.
The second one, it was favorable action.
Part of the reason I believe that they didn't want to make a recommendation on the first article is that the planning board hasn't held its required hearing. Part of the process on a zoning change is gets submitted to the selectmen, gets sent to the planning board. They have to hold a hearing within so many days and with so many days of public notice, and then make a report to town meeting. If the board can call a special town meeting, in which case they're not subject to the 45-day requirement to have the town meeting. But in this case here, it was a citizen's petition, so town had no choice but to schedule the town meeting within that 45-day period. So what was their recommendation on Article 2?
Favorable action.
Pardon me?
Favorable.
Favorable action.
Okay. There are 2 key documents for those in TV land or those who are here may not be familiar. There's the warrant, which is a legal document issued under the signatures of the select board and is properly posted. That's like an agenda of what's going to be discussed at the town meeting. The second important document that's existing is the facsimile of the warrant, which is put together by the advisory board and has their recommendations and any explanation they want to provide in advance of the town meeting on the articles. They should be commended for their prompt attention to these articles because they were under a very tight deadline on doing their review because of the 45-day time period. This is a draft, but it's probably the final document. It will be going out once it's approved and cleaned up perhaps a little to every registered voter at least 7 days before the town meeting. So those are the 2 key documents that exist now. And the third key document, which doesn't exist until shortly before town meeting, is the motions. The warrant is like an agenda. The motions, assuming that they're within the scope of the article, what's presented at town meeting, that's what town meeting acts on, and the motion has to be within the scope of the article, but the motion can't be something that's outside of the scope. So the next one is Article 3, submitted at the request of the Conservation Commission. It's, again, because there's a town meeting coming up before the annual town meeting. This would have otherwise been presented at the annual town meeting, but if it got approved, it wouldn't be in effect until 2024 because any bylaw change that's approved at town meeting has to be submitted to the Attorney General's office for approval, and they have like 90 days to do that. So I believe, the Concom was anxious to get this in place now because it provides additional protections for conservation areas. So that's what, the board also reviewed these at your last meeting, and matter of fact, Chris Crawford was here at the last meeting to explain it. So there's been some minor tweaks to the language that you saw before, but just to make it clearer and make it better if the town meeting were to approve it and if the AG's office were to approve it.
Jerry?
Are we having discussion on each of these items, or like how is this working? Because there are a couple of things in here that are concerning, and if you were here last week, you heard me ask a few questions of Chris, who is, the director of the department. And again, I've got about 12 years' experience. Most of that work was done in Hull, of building projects. And one of my concerns is that the average homeowner could be my mother-in-law, who's got a nice little house somewhere. It could be a new homeowner coming from Hingham. The rules are such that, and they've been this way for a long time, I'm not saying it's a new issue, but the rules are such that if you put on a very small porch, if you replace a rotted porch, and you have to put 2 footings in the ground and a pad for the stairs, the process involves not only getting a building permit, but also being forced to take a night from the homeowners, and a lot of times, the builder has to be there as well to plead your case in front of the Conservation Commission to request permission to do something as basic as that, which to me is just, it seems crazy. But this is the way it's been for a long time. It doesn't mean we can't change it. I'm hoping, and as we talk about things here, I think it's important, and Jen's, I'll be your first night. 3 of us are brand new to this, right? And we haven't met a lot of the players. We don't know a lot of the people that work in these departments and that sort of things and what they're thinking. And that's why earlier I abstained from, reappointing 4 people. I understand no one else is stepping up, but I just, at some point, I think we need to take a look at some of the policies that are in place. We have, again, a whole new group of people coming in, buying houses that are very expensive, and they want to do work in the house. And I've heard other stories of people being litigated based on perceived wetlands rules, and I'm not saying anyone's right or wrong, but at the end of the day, the house gets built, And I'm a person that is totally pro, when I see something such as the beach grass and how effective that is to the beach at the top of my mom's street at East Street, it's phenomenal. And I looked at it a couple days ago as I walked off. It's got to be 60 feet wide, and when I was a kid, there was nothing there. There was absolutely nothing, so it's fantastic. Building-wise, I would like to see every house in Hull on stilts, parking underneath, permeable material on the ground, and a hurricane-proof structure. Now, that's not realistic for probably 80% of the people in town. So it's going to be a long road to get there, and I understand higher storm surges and all that kind of stuff. So at some point, I'd like to discuss some of these things with the people on that board just to make Hull a little more inviting in terms of not only business, but you're a homeowner now and you want to do things. Some of the things that concern me on this bill in particular, though, is a lot of things on this article, I guess it is in Hull, and in talking to some of the other guys, it's a lot of very tiny lots. Right? Very small lots, very close to the water. And it could be waterfront on Beach Ave, it could be waterfront on Gun Rock Beach, and it could be a tiny little cottage that backs up to Straits Pond that homeowner wants to do something, and now maybe they can't do it, right? So I just think it's very quick. This is, the first time we're seeing this. We saw the rough draft initially, but it's just something to be concerned about. I'm not saying to not put it in front of the town. Anything controversial to me, we're not qualified to make these decisions for the townspeople, right? We should really put it to town meeting and let those people show up and vote. And if it's controversial, they're going to be there. They'll show up and vote. So, but there's a lot of things on this, and I probably have a lot more to say. But just some of my concerns are the people that, again, on one hand, we're talking about the ADU program, right? So as a town, we're probably going to make a decision. It sounds like all the boards have recommended we head in that direction because there's a housing crisis, right? Our relatives can't afford to stay in Hull. That's a fact. And I hear that from people all the time. So you can't expect the state to pick up all that slack. And that's why I like that proposal, because now certain families that have a small lot that normally wouldn't be able to put something on can do that and put on an in-law. And that person can be close to their family and they can live there. It's best of both worlds situation. But on the other hand, we're going to increase the regulations in maybe the setbacks and all the restrictions, and the fees are getting doubled. And if you get caught doing something you had no idea you weren't supposed to do because you're new to town or you're just ignorant of the facts because you don't know, now the fees are doubled. So there's kind of a lot of reasons why I'm not too fond of this guy.
Go ahead, Jen.
So I just wanted to point out, what's before the board this evening is approving the warrant, which does need to be posted tomorrow by the constable. One thing the board could do, or one path the board could take is, and I know in recent years, the board hasn't traditionally taken a position on articles, but as a board, you could decide to take a certain position on an article. That's one option. At town meeting, you're always free as a resident to stand up as a resident and state a position if you choose to do so outside of your role as a select person. So approving the warrant doesn't necessarily mean that the board supports any one or all of the articles, but again, should the board choose to, you can take a position on any one of the
We
articles.
could eliminate one if we chose to. And again, the only
Could.
reason, my only reasoning would be to allow those, and I've heard a lot of stories, okay, and I'm not gonna get into all of them right now, but to allow those homeowners that may have a project planned that may back up to, you know, sensitive areas, you know, give them a chance to look at this, have their lawyers look at it, have their, you know, plot plans taken out and all that kind of stuff, and just talk to the people that, in the building department, the conservation department, and just kind of get a feel for where they're at. And, you know, it could be a year or two down the road, and, you know, some of these things could really put some restrictions in place that will affect people.
And I think you'll notice the advisory board actually was split. There was the majority recommended favorable action, and I don't want to speak for the advisory board, but there was a minority opinion. I think that more or less speaks to some of your points, Jerry, and those
Interesting.
will be
Okay.
stated on town meeting floor.
Yeah, but hold on one second, Jim. The one thing I'd like to point out in their recommendation, and I don't know if they're trying to push it or your understanding is it to be law, but they point out the Conservation Commission cannot currently access the cumulative impact to changes in wetlands. This bylaw would allow the Conservation Commission to take this into consideration. So consideration, I think, is a
So I've looked at a lot of the language,
vast word.
to be honest with you, and that's kind of what I do, my training. So I've looked at, and there's a lot of the language I don't like. I'm not gonna get into all of it right now, but, you know, again, I've detailed all the reasons why I don't think giving homeowners 2 weeks to vote on this when we know nobody shows up to town meeting. We get 400 people max last time. So you're gonna have 300 people show up, make this decision, and you're gonna put a lot of power into, a lot of additional power into the hands of the Conservation Department. Again, my experience comes from being a homeowner as well, right? I've gone through that whole process as a homeowner, but I've gone through it quite a bit more as a builder. And again, in Hull, doing projects with the previous conservation woman, Ann Herbst, right? Who was great. And, you know, if you ask questions, you try to be as upfront as possible, but there are certain guidelines they're bound to, and there are other ones that I think are decided by the board that, you know, they could be more reasonable, let's say. And I'm not saying to allow people to do anything they want. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, you know, I don't think doubling the fines for someone that, you know, they find out someone filled in their little patch of land that they acquired next to their driveway on the house they're trying to refinish, and they get caught, and all of a sudden they get penalized in the town that they pay taxes in. You know, that's what we're talking about here, so.
Jim?
Yeah, a couple of things. You bring up, you know, valid concerns generally about changes in regulatory authority and regulatory bylaws. I would suggest that the board have another meeting before the town meeting, because the board, in past years, different boards take different, you know, positions on how they're gonna respond at town meeting. Sometimes boards will go through the warrant and they'll discuss it, and if they, as a board, are in favor of it, one of the members, they would designate one of the members to speak on that article at town meeting. If the board was not in favor of it, similarly, they would designate a board member to speak at town meeting why the board is against it. and ultimately, it's up to the public at town meeting to vote. Similarly, as Jen said, board members can speak even if they disagree with the board's position as individual residents of the town. Other people can also speak on articles. So, and again, the time crunch sort of creates problems all around, but that's what we have to work with. And you may want to have another meeting to discuss more in detail your positions on the article. You want to do it tonight, that's fine too. I would point out, and last time Chris Crawford, the Director of Climate Adaptation and Conservation, was here to explain this. Most of this article is more procedural. It sets forth the procedures and explains the procedures to the people, and also, you're correct, sets up a fee schedule for people to have to pay a fee, a town fee, in addition to what's provided for under the conservation laws. And they have that's set forth here. That's what they're presenting. There are a couple of provisions that could be more impacted by discretion of board members, of conservation members. For example, it says, any vegetated wetland determined to reduce flood risk by storing or conveying floodwaters shall not be filled or altered from performing this function. Another provision says, Conservation Commission shall take into account the cumulative adverse effects of loss, degradation, isolation, and replication of resource areas. Now, that's something that calls upon individual Concom members to make discretionary determinations based on the evidence that's before them. So it's not all Concom increasing their regulatory reach, but there are, as we pointed out, certain provisions where that exists. At the last meeting, it was, I think, my understanding, as well as several other people's understanding, that the board had approved putting this article, all these articles, on the warrant. If you wanted to take an article off the warrant, it would require staff to have to scurry quite a bit to redo the warrant. And as Jen said, you can, and I think I mentioned it at the last meeting too, you can move any of these articles, even the citizen petition articles, be postponed to the next town meeting, which hopefully will be the annual town meeting. And if the town meeting votes for that, then it gets postponed. So there will be, more time to discuss all these things. You may, if the board's going to discuss these warrant articles, decide what position they want to take on it, nothing prevents you from it's a public meeting, anyone from the public can come, and you can invite the building department, the Conservation Commission, any representatives of any boards to come in and explain it, so that it will provide more information to you as well as more information to the public.
Jason?
You had your hand first.
Can't tell.
So, you started that sentence, and again, I did read this very well, and I highlighted a bunch of things, but the end of that sentence, it just seems very open-ended. The Conservation Commission shall take into account the cumulative, this is a special wetland bylaw they're at. I assume they're adding?
Yes, this
Right?
would seek
Okay.
to amend the local bylaws dealing with conservation.
Okay, but it goes into this statement, and again, they're gonna take into account the cumulative adverse effects of loss, degradation, isolation, and replication of protected resource areas throughout the community resulting from past activities, permitted and exempt, and foreseeable future activities, or take any other action relative thereto. Now, that just really seems like you're giving these guys license to do pretty much anything they want to do, and I guess I would be against that. And again, I got my electric bill today, and I love Hull, and I'm not leaving. But we finally, the Hull electric plant is fantastic. My bill, relatively large house, 4-person household, $100 on average, 110, unbelievably, throughout the last 3 or 4 years, right, consistently. I just got my bill today, and I got a notification of that it has to increase quite a bit. So it's up to, I think, $178 this month. That's with the air conditioning, so maybe it's only like $50 more, but, and this is for the generators and all that. And again, my point is, homeowners in Hull are faced with fees, everywhere they turn. So this, to me, is just more, maybe some egregious doubling of fines and that kind of stuff. So there's some stuff to talk about here. I haven't heard anything from my other board members. I think it'd be good to get some input from them, just to see where people sit, and we might be able to decide this right away, right now, even though it means staff tomorrow morning having to retype the warrant. I don't think that's the end of the world.
Thank you, Jerry. I personally would like to I'd rather have it stay on the warrant and have those questions answered on the floor of the town
That's fair.
meeting.
We can do it at town meeting as well.
Because in all fairness, for us to debate about it now isn't fair to Concom.
That's true.
You know, so I think we really should put the
And this-
brakes on that one.
And that goes to my point of
conversation-wise.
public input, right? And 2 weeks to me for homeowners is not enough time to look into this in detail with the necessary people they have to talk to really find out if it's gonna affect them and their home and their plans for what they wanna do in the future, so.
I'm just the messenger.
No, I understand. I understand.
Town meeting has the option to take no action and delay
Absolutely,
it to the
correct.
next meeting, but that would be up to the folks who come to town meeting.
Yeah.
And whether 100 people come or 1,000 people come, that's our legislative body. And we have no control over how many people show up or who shows up to any town meeting, but they do have the option to vote no action and hold it over to the next town meeting.
And I think
Understood.
I think I told you today, you will find that
No, understood.
400 people.
I still
decide.
haven't heard a word, though, from my board members on where they sit on this issue.
Jason?
Yeah, I put my hand up before, but I mean, I'll just agree with Greg and Irwin. Yeah, I think I was gonna say it probably much longer and they said it much more succinctly. I think we should put everything we have on here, but including this one, on the warrant, not strike anything and have it go to the floor. I take your points and I think they're fair, but I guess the only other thing I would add is, it sounds like what you're talking about is a lot more big picture about how the town implements acts like the Massachusetts Wetlands Acts and other state and federal laws and regulations that we're
Jason,
we're
this is
required
specific to
implement.
the article they're presenting.
But you're having a
My
larger
concerns are
discussion about
specific
it.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a larger discussion as well, is my
Yeah.
point for sure, but.
But I'm happy for this to stay on and be debated on the
Yeah.
floor. There is a gentleman who wants to speak.
We have someone from the floor.
Name and address, please.
Ernesto Cabarro, 49 Central Avenue. This is an article, very great bond. It's going to affect probably 70% of properties in Hull within the conservation jurisdiction. So it's very important. It's the language, it's much more restrictive if it gets passed with the proposal in the article. It gives conservation total discretion to do whatever they want. You know, as we all know, we have the Wetland Protection Act, which has not been changed. I read an article, maybe perhaps the director, Chris Christopher, was misquoted, but he was saying that it was changed to the act. There has been no changes. So the Wetland Protection Act, the EP is the most stringent regulations in the country. So now we're looking to make even more restrictive with these languages. What I'm really shocked about that something of this importance doesn't get vetted out through public process. It shouldn't go. I believe long-time residents of Hull, you don't have the time there to bring experts and anything like that. What the language means. If they can do whatever they want. It's much more restrictive to the residents, the homeowners, and to the town. So I think it should be vetted out, the public process, public input. Should be meetings done prior to the board, the selectmen recommended whether or not you should go to town meeting. Once it's town meeting, it's only a few hundred people. They go inside, very short amount of time to make those decisions, and not be able to have a consultant to consult with. What's the rush? Why the hurry? Why can wait till next annual in May. In the meantime, do the right thing. Take the due process, public process, vet it out, and then people make the decisions on, would they support it, don't support it.
I totally understand your concern.
Nobody knows about this. Nothing has been published yet. It's not been posted. This is like a kept secret. So
Well,
what does the public know about it?
this,
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's been probably 3 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks that we've
It's
known
not-
about this,
Nothing posted.
and now
It's no
we're here.
official, it's no official document out there. And I've been told that no official document is gonna be there until this board signs it. So what's this? I mean, what is the rush? They quoted that this is due to a change with the Wetland Protection Act. No change that have been taking place. So we are well protected. All our resources and wetlands are well protected. Then it was quoted that what triggered this and the urgency is because of a recent case in the Supreme Court of the United States of America, the SOX against the EPA. The case was proposed in this article, A1, the article that proposed tonight, has nothing to do with the case they refer to. The case, the second again versus the EPA, has to do with navigable water of the United States of America. So a decision has been made, and I mean, I don't see any relevance between what's proposed and the Supreme Court decision. If it was relevance, why how conservation would want to bypass or circumvent the Supreme Court decision?
Thank you for your comments.
And
Chris, if there is a way you could briefly, and I mean briefly, give a good overview of what's in front of us.
I'm on my way out for a road trip, and I'm just stopping by to do that, so I'm gonna be very,
Okay.
That's dedication.
thank you. Just really quickly, what's presented before you is pretty much just to get us up to speed to what all the neighboring towns are doing. The local fees are implemented, and I only did a search of 4 or 5 towns, and all of them have that fee structure, and all of them have the doubling fee piece as well. And we're certainly not trying to get those that are unaware and didn't know. And I can tell stories of where folks said, oh, yeah, we were worried that you were gonna come. And as recent as very recent. So the commission has been trying to address this for a number of years. I'm very sensitive to the discussion and the concern today that's being presented about an article that it's sort of rushing to a 3-week special town meeting. And I'm very sensitive to that, and it's been something that I've been wrestling with since putting this together. The opportunity to do this had presented itself. We are going to be at town meeting with a number of articles. So this certainly won't extend town meeting. It provides that opportunity. I would ask the board to consider entertaining this for special town meeting. I suspect if the turnout is as such as everyone fears, with all due respect, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a supplemental suggestion to this. And I certainly, as representing the commission, wouldn't be against that. But I do want to be clear that even the cumulative effects piece in the local wetlands bylaw, again, just a quick search to who does this in town, because this came by way of the agencies and the communities that I work with that administer the Wetlands Protection Act in communities. We were required to do that by law. The town actually hired me to make sure that we are doing this, because the town is also one of those candidates. So we clearly have guardrails that we follow, and we certainly don't look to discourage folks from doing stuff. But again, I'm very sensitive to the sentiment that I'm hearing about this article. I really think it's important. Like I said, the cumulative effects is something that's adopted pretty wide across the state. It makes sense. DEP recognizes it as important.
And I would be welcome to entertain any discussion one-on-one with anyone that wants clearer information about this. And then lastly, and I promised to be short, and I almost didn't do that. On the Conservation Commission's website, on the town's website, there is a summary of these pieces, not the article itself, because it wasn't completed tonight, but a PowerPoint presentation that was prepared to present in a little bit of detail. And again, anyone that has concerns, Mr. Caporale.
Well, it should be public, it should be public review, it should be a process in place.
But anyway, Mr. Chair, I welcome.
I'm not here to argue with you.
I'm sorry, I encouraged him.
Let him finish, please. I know.
Yeah, sorry.
So anyway, I welcome, anybody to come into the office and discuss this up to a special town meeting.
Jerry?
Just so you understand the concern, and it really is out of genuine concern, because Hull has a variety of homeowners. I mean, little tiny shacks, big old homes, and everything in between. And everyone at different stages of their lives, too. I have a nephew just bought a house in Hull, okay? My mother-in-law's been here for 60 years, my mom, too. So, and again, you see these little shacks very close to the water, and, so the concern is that these people have plans. They may not have enough time to look at this. Well, I'm not saying it's all bad. I would like to see some stuff reworded, and I'm very frank about that, and we'd love to have some input. And again, I'd love to sit down with the board. I think that would be productive. But at the end of the day, that's where the concern's coming from, is there's just not enough time for some of these people. I think should at least be allowed the opportunity to look and see how this affects them personally.
Thank you, Chris. All right, with that said, I know, Jerry, you had thoughts of not sending it through. I believe they were sending it through, Brian?
I agree with you guys. I think letting, or making, or requiring more work through the town works to do this. I say we put it on, and maybe if you want to make a no action, as Erwin had said, and where we can discuss it more in the fall, in the winter, and then bring it back in May. That probably would be the best one to really, I think when Chris was here by himself, it really kind of sounded pretty good. And then now you leave this you leave the meeting, and then you start talking to people in town, and then you're hearing what Mr. Caporale is talking about. So, it's more complex than we thought initially.
Yeah.
And again, if it's going to affect 65 to 70% of the people in town, whether you're in a flood zone or what have you, yeah. And I'd have to agree with Jerry to say, let people find out how their property is going to be affected by this. So, their personal property.
All right, so it looks like we're going to move it forward. Ernesto, I strongly urge you to have a conversation with Chris, just an in-depth, whether it's email, in person.
I appreciate it. It should be up to me to have a conversation. It should be public.
It will be
Right,
at town meeting.
that public, the public part of it.
I'm a developer, I'm a developer, so I'm that guy to them.
Absolutely, I totally understand your concerns. But voice,
I get the Exxon.
You're a good guy to watch.
They've been good at it, they're steady, they consistent. What I'm saying is, what's the hurry? Nothing has changed. Same protection Hull has now, it's gonna have next month, and in May.
again, I understand your concerns,
I
but
think the reasonable thing, the responsible thing should be to open up a public hearing, consultation, advertising, meeting with people, have people ask questions, get public input, like every other community does. I mean, when it comes to HRA and other things, we public input. Why won't go for public input on this? I think
I believe the public input would be at special town meeting. That's where the voices are heard.
That should be for final discussion, for final comment, after people understand they have the chance to give their input. Thank you.
One final
To drive home the point, on the issue I brought up on making Beach Ave from A Street to L Street a one-way, I'm told we have to have a public hearing. It's a good point. So more discussion is definitely warranted on this. We're going to have the same discussions, by the way, at town meeting, which is fine. I'm perfectly okay with that. I think it's unproductive, personally, but we can definitely do that if you guys decide to go that route.
Well, it looks like it's going that route.
Yeah, that's fine. You understand my concerns. I don't think they're coming from a bad place, right?
No, it's a genuine concern,
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I think, what the board is saying, and just the fact that, you know, the warrant is before the board this evening, and that it's on as a discussion item, but it is just a discussion review of the warrant. What's before you is approving the warrant for posting. And I understand frustration as even a resident nope, let me finish, Jerry. As a resident in town, in any town, unfortunately, the majority of a community may or may not come out to any town meeting if that's their form of government, but as Erwin pointed out, that is a legislative body, and the time for the discussion on any of these articles at this point in time would be town meeting floor. And the time frame, and I think Mr. Caparotto brings up a good point, but I think that's something that the board members should take into consideration, and I can discuss with staff, is making sure that information on these articles is presented to the community as frequently as possible between now and that town meeting time.
So the only thing I would refute is when you said that we're here to accept this, because Jimmy has already explained that we do have the authority to alter this, and staff would be a little hurried to get this reprinted, but we can actually do that, I believe, right?
We're relitigating a vote. We already agreed to put it on.
Yeah, I think, I understand your concerns, I understand everyone's concerns, but town meeting will decide. And that's where we've already.
It's acceptable, totally acceptable,
Yeah.
but he did just tell us that we could alter this if we chose.
Let me be clear. The warrant is under the selectman's signature, and these articles are here were not made up by staff, but they were either citizens petition or from a board, and they were generally discussed, if not specifically discussed, 2 weeks ago at the board's meeting. And I agree with what you're saying, because unfortunately, the time crunch that was created not by anyone
Right.
connected is creating a problem here. But, you know, staff and the town clerk and the select board's office will have to do some scurrying around to take out this and redo the warrant. And you already had the advisory board having a public hearing on this article as well.
I'm perfectly okay with it staying at town meeting. I'm just saying that be prepared, we will be rehashing all these same points at town meeting again. So.
And that's important, and we do a
That's what
lot,
town
we do
meeting's
that a
for.
lot in town meeting. That's where the voices are heard.
But the difference is, at the end of it, there could be a vote. The difference is, at the end of it, there could be a vote on that article
All right.
with no public hearing. That's the point, and that's the delineation point of this whole thing, right?
I understand your concerns. Brian?
Jim, did you say earlier that we could actually, not vote, but we could actually have some kind of understanding between the five of us to make it at town meeting, to get up and say, hey, you know what, this is a more complex issue, with time constraints, us five would consider this to be no action at this time.
He did.
Well, anyone can make a motion of no action.
Yeah.
Certainly, the board can state that they want to move no action, or they want to postpone this to the annual town meeting. That's permitted by law. Anyone can do that. Typical procedure, as you know, at town meeting, is that the proponent of the article gets the first opportunity to speak, and then after that, the advisory board speaks on it, and then usually in past years, the town manager has spoken on it, and as a matter of courtesy, if a board member representing the board wants to speak on it, presenting the board's point of view, the moderator, would call on that person. Because, you're the chief policy setting body in the town, and I would think that the townspeople would want to know what the select board's position or feeling is on an article of whatever nature. It could be on any subject. So that's why, if you are going to be talking, deciding what position you're going to take on the article, I think that would be instructive. And bear in mind at town meeting, as Brian pointed out, someone can move no action or postpone it. And that's all in the public forum.
The body has to decide that.
Yeah, the
You
board
could- you
can't
could You
decide.
could bring it up, and the body could say yay or nay.
Yeah.
And then you move on from
The
it.
board can't decide, once the warrant is posted, the board can't decide, well, we're gonna take off that article out of the warrant, because the warrant, once it's posted, it's the town meeting's agenda.
So with that said, I was gonna wait till the end. George Boylan has agreed to next Wednesday or Thursday, he's not sure. Cable wants it to be Wednesday, to bring the proponents in here, have them video the details. They get to talk about what's going on, what their article is all about. There's no back and forth, there's no public input, and then that'll be repeated on Hull Cable TV, so everyone's a little more educated before town meeting. I think that'll help the process.
Help
and
educate the public on
help
the
educate the
article
public on all
specifically.
the articles.
Yes. Yes. But still won't give them enough time to look into their own properties and find out if there's an issue.
Could I just say one thing?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say too, I remember last week, I don't want to relitigate or rehash, but one thing I want to mention for people who weren't here either is that we did have kind of a discussion, right, about whether we put anything on at all that wasn't required by law, meaning anything but the citizens' petitions. We had that kind of discussion. Should we, go forward and add the things from the town? And I felt like that led towards, we should. And so, that resulted in what Jim is saying in terms of the extra work, the advisory board having several public meetings where they go through each of these one by one and have long discussions and dedicate a lot of their time to give real advice on this. So that's why I think I'll feel strongly about all of this, of just keeping it on, even our opinions, if we have them, do it at the floor at special town meeting. It's not ideal, it's at the end of the summer, but, I think you gotta balance it, right? And I think we made a decision, we really had a good discussion last week of, well, do we wanna put all these towards annual town meeting? And, we made a decision that there's some, things here, and as long as we're informing the public, it's great that George is following through on what he said he would do, and that's what I'm gonna feel about all of these, just to kind of sum it up.
Jim?
Just briefly, the planning board is having a required public hearing, I believe, next week. I don't know if it's next Wednesday or next Thursday.
I believe it's the 23rd.
The 23rd, which is next Wednesday. So you may want to keep that in mind. Nothing prevents people from going to that to talk about the ADU article. And I don't know how you want to organize that.
Well, the important thing is just for the proponents to educate the citizens with a short video. So they can, if they have to switch till Tuesday or Thursday to do that, I think it's important that they work around what we have in front of us. So I'll work that out with George.
Okay. And just so staff will understand, is the board going to have a meeting of the board, a board-scheduled meeting, which is a public meeting, and you have public comment, to discuss the board's position on these different articles and who's going to speak on them?
Discuss that yet.
I don't think we have
Haven't
enough
discussed
time to
that.
do that personally. The special town meeting's in 2 weeks, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about having a meeting next week to discuss these articles. It's just, again, it's not enough time for homeowners to figure out if it's going to affect their properties.
It would be for the board to discuss
Yeah.
whether or not we're taking the position. and whether or
I
not
think
we're
it's
making a
important
recommendation.
for us to get through the rest of this list and maybe make that decision
Yeah.
at the end of the meeting. Polly?
Yes, thank you. Polly Road, 9 Rockview Road. I apologize, but I've lost track. Did anyone say if the advisory board has made a recommendation on how they, on this one? If you've said it, I forget what you've said. Could
It
you
was
please-
favorable action 4-3 with 1 abstention, I think.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, so I think it's important we move on to Article 4.
Article 4 seeks to have an appropriation, authorize an appropriation of $120,000 or such other sum to pay for purchasing DPW-related equipment, and to determine whether it should be by borrowing or otherwise. The advisory board, Jen, can
Voted favorable action on Article 4.
there is for example, a pump at Draper Avenue, if you're familiar with that, there's a lagoon and there's a pump system there, and that apparently needs some serious work. So again, something that could be postponed to the annual town meeting, but the DPW and the administration felt that sooner than later is better for this, and the prices are not going to decline for what this is going to cost. So that's Article 4. Okay. Article 5 seeks to appropriate $600,000 or such other sum as may be voted at the town meeting to be added to the funds that were voted previously for the renovations and repairs at Fort Revere. The bids came in, and I don't know if Jen had a chance to dive into the bids yet. She just started today, but as was told before, the $2 million that was previously authorized, the bids came in more than that, and apparently there's an expectation that the $600,000 will make up the difference on it. You note that 4, 5, and 6 all say a sum of money and or such other sum, because it's possible, even though it's only a couple of weeks away, the town meeting, that new information could come in that could change these figures. But we wanted to at least give people notice that we're looking at that amount of money. It may be more, may be less, but that's the amount of money that's being looked at for Fort Revere Tower. And again, advisory board, was a majority report and a minority report for the advisory board. I didn't mean to take your
Oh, no, that's okay.
role.
Same work.
And again, that could be discussed at town meeting.
Agreed.
So the next one is Article 6, seeking an appropriation of $300,000 or such other sum to pay costs of renovating and making repairs to the exterior of the Memorial School, and also determining how that's to be raised. Apparently, and there is a commentary, I'll let Jen explain the commentary, but there is, school department came forward just very recently with news that there is a need for this type of work. That's why it wasn't brought up before. I'm not sure when the school department knew, but I'm sure it was something that came up very sudden, and they just discussed it as well. So defer to the town manager.
Yeah, I will just add that it's to make emergency repairs. Obviously, the school, and I believe it's the portico, which I believe might be in the main entrance. And the amount requested, as I stated, is for emergency repairs, and the expectation is at annual town meeting, there may be further funding requested to make full repairs once those repairs are better understood, the scope of and the cost of.
And the school will be open. They'll just be using the side entrance and blocking off. It hasn't gone past the yellow tape at this point, right?
I don't know.
I believe they're gonna try to get some fencing / railings to make sure no one can climb up there.
So again, being new, this is an example of something I would assume that the select board would be notified of, right? And we really haven't been up until now. Someone has obviously reached out to me previously last week, and I was notified of the problem over there. But do we have any specifics on it? Do we have certain individuals in town that are kind of overseeing what's going on, working with the contractors on on what it's going to cost to repair this thing and all that? And like, where does that stand? And do we not? Are we not in the loop because that's a school department issue, right?
The school
school
department
property.
did apologize for not emailing the select board.
So I could find out
Spoke to them over the weekend.
details or the project team. But that building is under school control, not the town's authority.
Except to the extent that the school department can't borrow money, only the town can borrow money with the approval of town meeting, except on certain limited exceptions, and the approval of the Board of Selectmen to borrow money. Apparently, you know, a lot of this is happening very rapidly. Doesn't necessarily excuse an oversight, but sometimes there is, and they apparently
Yeah,
didn't
not the end
get
of
the
the world.
word to everyone in time.
We move forward, right? But do we have any details on what the issue is specifically?
I don't know.
It's,
No,
I
it's-
forget the name of it, but it's one piece that could potentially fall.
Yeah, so
that
it's
hurt
just
somebody.
stabilize the portico roof line at the entrance of the Hull Memorial School building.
Yeah, portico, so I believe that's the big A-frame structure sitting on top of the columns. Big masonry structure, right?
Yep. Erwin?
Yeah, I just want to point out that Article 5 and 6 are asking us to bond additional funds. And I just want to go back to 5. 2 years ago, when the tower was passed, the bids, if I recall correctly, then were 1.5, and we passed 2.2 to cover any contingencies. Now we're here 2 years later, and it's gone up 600,000, and to be honest with you, we don't even know if that's the total cost. And then the next one, Article 6, we're being asked eventually to bond something that we don't know what the total cost is. Both of those are going to be borne by the taxpayers, and I think we need to prioritize what's an actual emergency, what's actually needed, and what actually is a benefit to the town. And I think clearly Article 6 is. Article 5, I'm still racking my brain to figure out what the benefit to the town is of the tower, and to end up spending $3 million or eventually more. And I think we really need to focus on the school, which is a safety issue. And I'm just saying that if we do determine whether or not we will support Article 5 and 6, I am strongly opposed to Article 5 from the Select Board recommending that.
Thank you, Erwin. Jason, did you have a question?
I do. I guess with 4, 5, and 6, but then I guess in particular with 5 and 6, I don't want to put you on the spot, Jen, but I think I get why all of these were inserted. And specific to 5, I know when Phil made the presentation about the first for bonding, he was clear that our budget would allow for the debt service. We were rolling off of certain certain bonds, and we could roll this on. And I think I saw on the advisory board's notes, when they were presented this, at least on Article 5, that they said the additional debt service for the 600,000 would be 45,000 a year. And so
For the first year.
For the first year.
For the first year.
But I guess my question is particularly really on 4, 5, and 6, because it all could involve borrowing. I mean, I guess I don't need to put you on the spot about it. I guess what I would say is, this is to allow us to decide whether we're going to bond, and you would be doing that. And I guess, do you feel comfortable enough that, it's worth it to seek town meeting's approval for these 3 articles, understanding that, that's worthwhile to put that out there, to explain it to the town body, knowing that we may or may not then bond up, the entire amount for any of these 3, but that we could, and we'll be able to justify that we could carry the debt service for all 3. You know what I mean? So it's tricky because it's your first day, but we're putting these through, and no matter whether or not we take the exercise to do so, town meeting's going to want to know, can we absorb the debt service, and that's going to be on you.
And we could certainly address that with staff at town meeting. What I would say at this point in time, particularly on Articles 4 and 5, are that they do seem to rise to the level of emergency situations. I think in Article 4, you'll notice in the advisory board's recommendation, they note that the current pump is electric. It's over 22 years old and has failed. There's a secondary pump which has been rehabilitated in 2016, and so it is important to make that, we have that opportunity now to make that change. Similarly with Article 6, and it's an emergency repair to the entrance of the Memorial School. I don't think I need to say more about that. As for Article 5, you know, what I would say to the board is that town meeting, those I'm sure most are familiar, we've had extensive discussion and debate and evaluation of the tower. Town meeting did ultimately approve that work. I can say with 100% certainty that construction costs are rising exponentially at a historic and almost absurd rate, and that's of no fault of the town. And, you know, I think that there is certainly value, and again, back to the process of putting it before a town meeting to decide if the town wants to bear the cost of, or the burden, the additional burden of the additional costs relative to the tower, relative to any one of those articles, but that is the feedback I'm giving to the board on each of those 3 articles.
Jason, go ahead.
I guess to follow up on Article 5, I think my understanding was that for the advisory board's recommendation, I think Michael Buckley did the presentation to the advisory board about that, and I guess I didn't review the whole thing, but certainly he has an understanding as the town, his title is Town Finance Director, that we're able to absorb the debt service coverage, right? So all I'm saying is when we go, I guess my hope is, you know, kind of how the system worked before, particularly on articles related to spending, that when they go to town meeting, you as the town manager would feel comfortable presenting and explaining, you know, as with Michael Buckley's assistance, I suppose, right?
Yes.
If that's the thinking, yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Erwin?
I'd just like to add that the fact that we can absorb the debt service needs to be balanced against whether or not it is a priority for the town, and whether or not there are other issues that are equally or more important that we may want to go into debt for and absorb the debt service. So absorbing the debt service is only one part of it. Whether or not it rises to the level of the main thing that we want to absorb that debt service, when there are so many other unmet needs in town that we could borrow for. So I just want to say that that's only one part of it.
Jen?
I could speak to that briefly, Erwin. You know, I think we might be up on our 5-year in the capital improvements for the town, and it is time to revisit that, and that is something I hope this board pursues and supports in the near
That's
future.
important, yeah.
Any other questions? Brian?
So my only hang-up on Article 5 is the fact that, you know, we bonded $2.2 million last May. We're going for another, was it 600? Is that the, so you're almost at 3 million, 2.8. And what Erwin said, you really don't know what the true number is going to be. And the fact that there's no public access after that, after we spend all that, to me is concerning. So I'd be all for, you know, it'd be a tourist destination if we did it, but you know, spend that kind of money and then not even allow the tourists to access to go up. I've never been up top, and I've heard the views to die for. So again, spend that kind of money with no public access.
Isn't there public access to go up to the top?
I don't think so.
Hold on for a
perhaps-
second, guys. Jim?
I was just going to say, I thought that there was going to be public access after these repairs to be able to go up to the top under controlled conditions, but it would not be ADA compliant, but they were going to be having visual displays on the ground level to try to show what you could have seen from there and what is up there.
Bless you.
God bless you. So, I don't know, maybe Pat, because it's one of his pet projects, and Bill.
Bill, hold on for 1 second. Polly, name and address.
Holly from 9 Rockview Road. To the comments that have been made by board members, do you say the author of each of these articles, this one in particular about the tower, are they going to be talking at our special town meeting to go over details, answer people's questions, and talk about, if you will, what benefit long-term there is to us as a town?
Mhm.
Is the author of this going to be speaking at STM?
Well, I guess the author would be Chris or Jen, the town manager. You know, and if I could speak to the $600,000 extra, I mean, as we're doing the little projects around town through CPC funds, every time we open up a new bid, it's $200,000, $150,000, higher than what we anticipated. This $600,000 is not a shock to me. I expected it to be way higher than it was. And I don't know if it's greed by contractors or just taking advantage of what's in front of them. But, you know, Jason and I sat on a board for a bunch of years together, the CPC board, and the passion behind that tower, you will see come out at town meeting. A lot of people look at it as our icon. It's a massive expense, but if we don't get to it now, 3 or 4 years from now, it could be on the ground, or it could be $5 million. So that's where we're at with that. Name and address?
Yeah, Bill Spike, 1037 Nantasket Avenue. Greg is right. The town of Hull has been very remiss as far as maintenance. This is sort of like, if we repaired it as we would a highway, we had no problem. But it's our responsibility, not the state's, and we have been negligent in this over the years, and it's falling down. And yes, one of the big things was, can we access the inside of the tower to get to the top? It's pretty cool if you're up there. The answer is basically no. It really shouldn't be. Jim was on point here. You could go inside and get some kind of a video type of experience, but it's expensive. And historically, to improve it historically, if you just deal with the outside, but we have a structural problem there. So the town has to do it. It's town property. Again, I'm going to quote the chair. If we don't do it, it's going to fall down, and it's our responsibility. So I know it's not warm and fuzzy, but it's ours.
Mm-hmm. Name and address, please.
Patrick Finn, 8 Telegraph Ave. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to agree with Bill. Bill's on the Historic Commission, and I know that there's a preservation deed restriction preservation requirement that the town signed with the Mass Historic Society previously when grant monies was done to rehab the tower. Of course, back in the bicentennial days, it was a hell of a lot cheaper. But we had the town had to sign that. I believe the Historic Commission signed off on it, and it's our obligation. So there's been about 5 votes, including a special town meeting vote called by citizens petition that was unanimous, and any tower item that has ever been put before the town and voted on has been approved. And you're right, Mr. Chairman, that, you know, folks will come out, and it's, you know, it's our house, and it's like, you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. I mean, you can't control the bid environment. So I don't think we really have a choice, and I hope the people, you know, vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Erwin?
Just a question for Jim. Does this require a 2/3 vote?
Borrowing, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Didn't know if you said Jen or Jim.
Jim?
Jim,
Yes.
yeah.
Jim, Jen.
Borrowing requires a 2/3 vote.
All right, so any more discussion? We good to move on?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. All right, we're on Article 7.
Okay. Article 7 is to amend the bylaw, basically to change the restriction against retail or adult use of marijuana being sold here in Hull. So that's a citizen's petition article, and I believe the proponents, or some of the proponents, are here if the board wants to ask them any questions on it, but it basically is the same article that was before the board a couple of weeks ago, where they are seeking to change the general bylaw and the zoning bylaw to permit adult marijuana use. Article 8 is very similar, relates to that. And Article 9 relates to increasing the amount of local sales tax that the town would receive, but I believe it was determined that we've already done that. But Jen can tell you what the advisory board's comments and recommendations are.
Yeah, I can tell you that on Article 7, the advisory board voted favorable action by a vote of 6-2. On Article 8, they also voted favorable action by the same vote, 6-2. And Article 9 was no action. And as Jim stated, that's because the town of Hull already is taxing at 3%.
Can't hear what she's saying. I couldn't hear the last thing you said, sorry.
Articles 7 and 8, the advisory board voted favorable action by a vote of 6-2. On Article 9, they voted no action because the town is already taxing at 3%.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, I just have a question. In the NBOD is where we're talking, the Nantasket Beach Overlay District?
That's where there's like an overlay for marijuana use in the NBOD.
Yes. So my question is, did we ever vote on the amount of businesses?
It's limited to 2
Okay,
marijuana-related establishments
okay,
at present.
thank you. Any other questions, Erwin?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak for a moment to the minority vote on Article 7, where their concern was that this would require a marijuana business to be in business in town for a year, which would mean they would have to start out as a medical facility. I think that's important, that someone that's going to be selling marijuana be in business in town for a year, so that we have experience with them, we know how responsible they are. And the current folks have been in business for almost 2 years. So I just think that I just wanted to say that about the advisory board, is that the minority vote was specifically around the 1-year requirement, but as a select board member and as a resident, I see the 1-year requirement as a good thing, so that we know this is a responsible business person. I just wanted to add also, it is the NBOD, but it extends past the NBOD to include the current medical facility that's there now onto George Washington Boulevard.
Thank you. Jack?
So not knowing anything about this type of business, I'm just curious if does that hamper the proposed business owner at all? In other words, is it 2 different licenses?
Yeah, well, the question, the issue for the current owner is that since, as I understand it, since so many adult use facilities have opened, purely medical now is not a good business plan.
Right.
Originally, it was just medical that opened.
Right.
So for someone to come in for a year, it would have to be medical, because that's as of right. So they would function, however they kept it afloat for a year, and then they could apply to go for adult use.
Right, so you're talking anybody new that would apply?
Anybody new, right, would have to be in business for a year, which again, it gives us a chance to try them out. Which I
And
think
there's
is
only
important.
one other spot,
Yeah, we're only allowed
potentially.
two businesses.
Understood.
All right, you good? Brian, anything? All right. Looks like good to go to 10.
Okay, Article 10 is a citizen's petition to seek, by its wording, to authorize the select board to petition the legislature for special legislation granting an additional package store license for Hull. And they've proposed language on it. So if this gets past the town meeting, it can't compel the select board to file the petition, but it would be an expression of town meeting's desire or support or lack of support to petition the legislature for this. Again, once it goes to the legislature, There's no guarantee that they're going to pass it. And then if it comes back as approved, and the board has an application, the board still has discretion on acting on the application. This petition is for a specific business at a specific location. At the advisory board hearing on it, Mr. Patel and his family, some of his family members were here. There was also another resident, the petitioner, who spoke in favor of it. And if you know where the store is at Anastas Corner, I think it's called Quick Pick or something like that. As you're looking at it, to the right of that, there's what looks like an empty storefront, but it's really apparently part of the Quick Pick store, but they use it for storage. They explained that their proposal would be to move the alcohol sales into that part of the Quick Pick store, and have it there, although that would be something that would be addressed at the time, if this gets passed, that they came before the licensing authority, the select board, to seek that license. And
That would be the old Angelo's spot, right?
yeah.
Okay.
And Mezzomari was in there for a while, too.
Yeah.
The prime petitioner, Ms. Revicchio, lives in the area, and she finds the store very, very convenient. It's handicap accessible. There was a question about the other store that's down the street, which is a full liquor store, at 300 block of Nantasket Ave across from the hotel, whether they're handicap accessible or not. And I believe that was going to be looked into.
Thank you, Jim.
So Jen can tell you what the advisory boards have to say.
The advisory board voted favorable action 6-1 with 1 abstention. They did note that it would be an uphill battle for state approval, but thought that it warranted going through the process at both the local and state levels.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
No.
Jen, you good?
I'm good.
Name and address?
Bill Smythe, 1037 Nantasket Ave. Jen, what was the vote of the advisory board on Article 5?
Yeah, I think we did do that.
Yeah, 5-2, favorable.
Favorable, yeah.
Favorable.
That was the tower.
The tower.
5-2.
5-2.
And there's a majority report and a minority report in the facsimile.
Thank you.
With that said, we're through everything that was on our agenda. I want to go back to the thought of having a meeting before town meeting. I think there'd be some value in it. Maybe have a virtual meeting on Tuesday, the 29th, just to go over any kind of concerns. And if we do it virtually, we're able to work and fit it in our day, possibly. I think it has some value. It's a couple days before the meeting. Go ahead.
I'm open to that. I guess I would just state ahead of time, though, I think I have a position of, not taking a board of selectmen vote on where we stand in terms of favorable or unfavorable action on any of these articles. I think I've seen, the way the board of selectmen has operated in the past. I've seen you do it, other people do it is, stand up and give their opinion and whether it's for or against, and I would kind of prefer to keep that. I think, when it comes to town meeting, we really have to respect that as the as the main governing body of our
Absolutely.
town. I remember, not to go too back into this, but when I started reading all the stuff about how to operate as a select board, the first thing it said was, in the beginning in New England or in Massachusetts towns, there was town meeting, and that's the way the town was run. And then after several years, they thought, well, this is inefficient. A select board should kind of guide things along, and then town managers, and so I really, I think it's tricky because it's this special town meeting and it's at an odd time, but it really, I think we're doing a good job at getting information out there. I think, I think our job is different. I think we should, if we have opinions as citizens, of course, share it, but just forecasting ahead to Tuesday. And That's my opinion.
Erwin?
I disagree. I actually think people have the right to know if we are taking a position on on any of these articles. In the past, we have, but in some articles, there's no we don't take a position. Some articles we do, and one person then is chosen to speak for the board. And then any select board member is free to speak as a citizen, as an individual not representing the board. But I think citizens have a right to know, and some may look to what the select board does. We're elected representatives of the people in the town. So I'm all in favor of us having discussions about each of these articles and determining whether or not we choose to speak to any of them.
Yeah, I think my point was just to have that last-minute review, and if we choose to go in a direction with one of them, we could decide that day.
Sure.
You know, so it wouldn't be a very long meeting, it would just be that final review 2 days before town meeting.
And that would be after the proposed presentations by the people
Yeah, the
presenting the articles?
presentations would be next week, and then ours is just like a last-minute get prepped for town meeting type of thing. I think it has value. Even if we don't vote on each individual article, we'll be ready, we'll be,
Yeah, we may choose not to recommend any or to whatever, but I think that it would be, it's worth having that discussion.
is there so we okay with having a meeting on the 29th virtually?
Sure.
And
What time are we looking at, day or evening?
I'd prefer the day.
Is that
Are you
what-
good with that?
Is that Tuesday?
Work schedule? Yeah, it's
or
Tuesday.
29th?
Hold on a second.
Just whatever works for all 5 of us. Well,
You have
7 of us.
Don't you have to post it, though?
We do, but we're a week,
There's time to
it's 2
post it.
weeks out.
It's
We have
48
plenty of
hours to
time.
post.
Okay.
So it'd be the 29th. You know, I know it's gonna interfere with everyone's work schedule, but it's important, so maybe 9 o'clock, 9 AM?
I can't do 9. I can do it anytime after 11 or 11:30.
I'm fine with that, too.
Me too.
You wanted to say noon?
I'm fine with what everyone chooses.
Okay.
Noon
Yeah,
good?
noon is probably best.
Because
That
it's our
way,
lunch hour,
Noon
too,
is
and,
lunch hour.
yeah.
if you're working, you can, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
All right.
I'd make a motion.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to sign the 2023 special town meeting warrant to be held on Thursday, August 31st at Hull High School, beginning at 7 PM, and to continue until said meeting is concluded.
Thank you, Jason. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Brian. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous? Thank you. Jen, can
No, I
you?
abstained,
Oh, Jerry's
for
abstaining.
clarification.
Jerry's abstaining. So 4-0 with 1 abstention. And, Jen, could you set up that meeting?
Yes.
All right.
So 8:29
At noon.
at noon.
Noontime.
And that's to review and discuss
Yeah.
warrant articles.
Mm-hmm. And with that said, there is nothing left, so if there's a motion to adjourn? Oh, absolutely.
Well, because we're gonna press tomorrow, so I'm just about the meeting on next Wednesday or Thursday where the proponents will speak. Will that be posted so people can see?
Yes, it'll definitely be posted.
So
I'll get
watch.
back to you with the details, because we're kind of unsure of what night it'll be.
Yeah, if in the
But it-
meantime, we're going to press, so I will just say, more details, but we could always post it on the website, so you could let me know.
Yeah. Mhm.
And is that just a public meeting, or?
It's basically, the proponents will be filmed talking about their article, and then it'll be put on Hull Cable TV, Hull TV, so people can have a chance to be ready for town meeting
Okay,
with
so
what's
you can
actually in front of
Give us that
them.
information so we can put it in the Times and,
Mhm.
and when it's gonna be shown and things like that?
Yep,
Okay, and we can also post it on the website, so make sure that you get in touch with us, so let me know.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that said, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah,
All right.
We're good?
All right.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting tonight.
Motion by Brian, second by
I'll second.
Jason, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Good night, everybody.